1924, the beginning of the Falls Village Volunteer Fire Department. Changes ensued. Then, in 2016, work began on the new Emergency Services Center.
same time, drop it, right?
Ready, Tony?
man. Oh, here. I got this little nub right here.
Growing plants? Oh, I've been at it for a while.
How long is a while?
Oh, gosh. I guess since I was 8, 9 years old. I lived with my grandmother.
Where was that?
Over in Dover Plains.
Uh-huh.
I lived with her for quite a while, and she taught me how to grow a vegetable garden. I was hooked ever since on growing plants.
How nice, how nice. And when did you get interested in flowers?
I don't know, actually. Tell you the truth, I just fell into it, I guess. I ran a couple of greenhouses, and actually I built my own greenhouse a long time ago when I was like 17, 18, out of conduit. And the snow told me exactly what I did wrong that winter. But yeah, I got into seeding and cuttings and all that kind of stuff.
Did you ever go to school for any of this?
The School of Hard Knocks.
Self-taught.
Self-taught, experience.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never was very good at books.
Oh, neither was I. And this is your lovely wife, Roberta.
Oh.
Hi, Roberta.
Hi, Eric. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
She's very much a big part of growing these plants, too.
Uh-huh. Well, I'd like to talk to both of you about the plants. I was thinking maybe you could take me around and show me things. I thought we could start with the ones that I filmed last Monday.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
You remember which ones those were?
Yeah.
The poppies?
I think it was poppies,
The poppies.
alliums.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are right over here. Oh, look at that, how these poppies are right inside that allium. Oh, it's lovely. These alliums are called Allium Christophi, or the Star of Christopher. And they're, as you can see, they're made up of multiple tiny flowers that look like stars, and they form a big globe. And they're a bulb, and they're part of the onion family, right, Tom?
Yes.
The alliums.
Really? Onions?
Yeah, and because they're part of the onion family, the deer don't bother them, and the mice and moles and voles don't bother allium. So they're very long-lived in our gardens.
Cool.
And they come back year after year.
Oh, really?
Which is wonderful. Yeah.
Sure.
Put them in once, get many, many, many seasons of beauty. And the poppies
Yes.
are as old as time, I guess.
Yeah, oh.
Yeah.
And
Poppies have been around for centuries.
yeah,
Yeah.
these are Oriental poppies. These are not opium poppies. And these probably came to this country from England. The English probably brought these poppies because they would have them in their gardens. And they're very, very beautiful, but short bloom period. And some years, if it's a rainy spring, you hardly have any time at all to enjoy them. But they're so pretty that I don't think I'd want to have a garden without poppies. They can be kind of messy.
But they're well worth it.
They're well worth it, and the trick to growing poppies is kind of just leave them alone and don't fuss over them too much. These poppies will self-seed themselves. They will, if you let, this is a seed head. This is the seed head of the poppy. And it will dry out, and it's very pretty, actually. And when the seed head is dried, it's full of poppy seeds. And those poppy seeds will just naturally fall out on the ground around the plant, and those will form new plants. So that will perpetuate the poppy crop. But that's part of the reason why you have to kind of just leave things alone and let the seeds germinate, and they'll come up the following year. But you can't pull out the seedlings, so you have to let them stay, and that's part of the joy of the poppies, and part of the reason why you can't fuss with them too much. And if you pull out the wrong thing, you've pulled out next year's poppies. So they're a lot of fun, a little messy, but worth the trouble, and very, very pretty and nice to enjoy. So what else should we talk about, Eric? This is such a gorgeous thing. This is called a penstemon, and this variety is called Dark Towers. And this is one plant. It's also a perennial. It comes back year after year in the gardens here in Connecticut and the Northeast. And it's just got such a nice shape and form, and that dark, beautiful dark burgundy foliage. And over here next to it, blooming, is a plant called the Trollius. And Trollius is related to the buttercup. So some varieties are blooming now at the same time as buttercups, and some bloom a little bit later. And Trollius likes a kind of a wet spot, just like buttercups do. And that is really their only requirement, is that they have enough water. And I'll tell you the truth, Eric, I can't remember the name of this clematis. Only that it blooms most of the summer, and after the flowers go by, I cut them off, and it just keeps pushing out more flowers. It's really prolific. This little plant, I'm trying to remember. This is a clematis that's a non-vining clematis, and you have to put a support around it, as you can see we have. It's called Clematis integrifolia, and it comes in blue and pink. And there might be a white one, I don't know about that. And I can't remember how I even first got this plant, only that I'm in love with it. And I've grown it from seed, and I've also grown it from divisions. And Tom has done some growing of it from cuttings now. And this is another one also that has a long, long season of interest. After the flowers bloom, the flower heads are these gorgeous, funny little furry things that are very interesting, and eventually those furry things get furrier and furrier, and each little piece is part of a seed pod. So that they really do have a long interest and long time. And my son built these little trellises for me a long time ago when he first started to be a welder. So, one of the things that I love about perennials is they don't bloom all summer. They have their own time, and that makes it to me all the more precious, that each thing has its season and its time of bloom, and it makes to me that you need to be aware of it and get out there and really enjoy it while it's in bloom, and then go on to the next thing. But it also makes me get more interested in the foliage of a plant, because after the flower has gone by, or before the flower comes, I want to know, what are the leaves going to look like? What is the structure of the plant, and the architectural and the color of the green in the foliage. Back here we have some really shady areas, and I've tried to brighten them up by using limey greens and bluish greens, shiny versus mates, and some fringy ferns. And just try to, there aren't many flowers in here, but I think it's very pretty to look at because of the different shades of green, the different colors, and mix it in with a little yellow and chartreuse and blue. And you really don't need too many flowers.
Enjoying our gardens?
Yes.
We are enjoying our gardens.
Did you mention how old these gardens are?
No.
Let's
They're
see.
like, well, 20 years old?
Almost 20, yeah.
There's one thing that I've really realized about gardens, especially perennial gardens. They are actually gardens in motion, because they're always changing. Unlike annuals. You put in an impatient in, the impatient does one thing, and it's like that all season long. Whereas a perennial garden is just moving, changing throughout the whole season, even from year to year.
Very dynamic, yeah.
Very much so. But
This tree is a weeping katsura tree with the heart-shaped foliage. And I bought that from my brother Charlie's nursery in Sharon. He called me, he said, I have a tree I think you're going to like. And sure enough, at Paley's Market, it was a weeping katsura tree, and we planted that, maybe 15 years ago, Tom?
yeah, well, that was only about 5-6 feet tall.
Yeah, it was small enough to put in the car and bring it home. And
Yeah.
That's amazing.
and Tom has trained it and kept it pruned back so that now we can even walk through this little tunnel. Kind of like a banyan tree in the south.
You're right. What's very interesting about this katsura is it does what's called back budding. It has buds that come off of even the thickest of the trunks, and it just sprouts out branches from all over.
And they are beautiful.
And the katsura, what's really neat about it is in the fall time, when it starts to cool off, the leaves give off a cotton candy smell. Oh, it's just gorgeous. On the first frost, I run out here just to, the whole area is just filled with cotton candy flavor.
Yeah, they're a wonderful tree.
Yep.
Wonderful,
Very much so.
wonderful.
Yep, we love our gardens.
We do. And it's just so much fun discovering new plants and trying them out and putting them in a garden so that we can show the customer, well, this is what it looks like in the pot, but if you put it in your garden, you can see here how it will look when it actually matures and comes to life and what it will actually look like in a garden. And
well, we realize that the plant can't do what it can do in a garden in a pot.
Right.
No.
The pot
That's just
just
not going to
restricts it.
happen.
Another plant that people really enjoy. They come here when it's blooming because of it. And that is this Phyllictrum. Phyllictrum lavender mist, which is a meadow rue. It gets anywhere from 6 to 8 feet tall. And the flower head is huge. It can be anywhere from 12 to 18 inches in diameter. And it consists of many, many, many smaller flowers, which are purple with a little pink in it, Roberta?
Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of a purpley pink.
Right. And this here, I created an alley with this phyllictrum on both sides of it. So people just love coming through here.
You can tell we were 20 years younger when we started this.
This is
Another interesting thing is that we do grow not your normal, everyday, traditional perennials. We try to keep things interesting so that people have a variety of plants to put into their gardens. One of them is Rogersia, which is what this here is. Shade to a moist area. It does have a flower, but it's mostly grown full of foliage. As you can see, it's very nice. This particular cultivar is called Hercules. We did get in 2 other new Rogersias this year. One's called Chocolate Wings, and the other one was Cherry Blush. I'm really pretty excited about the Cherry Blush because when the leaves come out on that, they are brick red. I mean, just almost black. One of my best friends and landscaper, Marsha Kaufman, she turned us on to a lot of our plants because she's really good. She knows her plants. And she, as a landscaper, she wanted all these different plants, and she asked us to grow them for her.
Oh.
And so that's how we came about doing these.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. It's called Kringashoma, which is a yellow wax bell. Blooms late summer, and it has just like the name, yellow wax bell. It's a bell-shaped flower, and it has a waxy look to it. Marsha Kaufman was our very first customer who came in and started buying plants every Saturday. And it just ballooned from there. This house here is called Blue Angel. And next spring, we'll be going through here and taking out probably half of them and leaving the rest, so that the ones that we do leave in the garden can spread their wings or spread their leaves and get to the size that they really want to get to. And the ones we dig out, of course, we'll use for propagating and pot up and sell to our customers.
Nice.
Oh.
Nice.
This is thistle. A lot of people have bad memories of thistles.
Because they stick you.
Yeah,
they're
have a little
rough.
stickiness. But what's really neat is the flower. That's at the top of this is called globe thistle. This flower will have a ball on it, a little bit bigger than a baseball, about the size of a baseball. Nice blue color, but very fragrant. Oh my God, it is very sweet. I mean, beautiful sweet smell. That's why I put it right alongside of the walkway on my way out to get the mail or the newspaper. I get a nice whiff of the globe thistle.
Yeah, and monarch butterflies love it.
Oh, do you get monarchs here?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yes. Yep.
Great.
All the time.
Love that globe.
Uh-huh.
In this gardens, we've been fooling around with a lot of ground covers, mostly meant for shade and dry shade. And it took a few years for us to figure out what was going to work. And it's been really fun to trial and error, which it's easier to do when you have a nursery. But we found some things that work, and we've enjoyed the process. We put a lot of a plant called epimedium up near the foundation, and that blooms in the early spring. It's very pretty. Down here we have a big batch. These were actually here originally with the property, and I wanted to leave those because they're probably really, really old, these violets. They're a white one with a little blue speckle in them. And over here I did some ivy because this was a hard to cover spot. Nothing wanted to grow there, but the ivy is doing okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It was one of the peonies that was growing and that we decided to move. So one fall I dug it up and moved it to where the other peonies were. And 2 years later, lo and behold, it's back.
Oh.
Yep,
And doing great.
doing great.
Yeah.
And what it is it's all the roots that I had cut and left in the ground. And it's a form of plant propagation. Root pruning, and all those roots that were there, they sat there and developed eyes, and there it is. It's almost like I never even moved it.
Yeah.
Tom, I'm glad you participated.
Oh, thank you very much.
You were
Eric.
very informative, and thank you so much for showing us around. I really enjoyed it.
Well, it's my life's pleasure dealing with plants.
God bless you. That's
What's
great.
he get me talking about?
Yeah, you were great.
It takes me a while to get wound up.
Uh-huh. Good. And Roberta, my thanks to you too.
Oh, thank you, Eric.
It's been lovely.
Thank you so
And
much.
we'll continue this down the road. I want you folks to be able to get back to work today.
Yes, I got some water.
It's a good work day.
Yeah, but thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
grab my smoker. So I like the smoker to keep the bees calm. Bees communicate through pheromones, through smells. So I want to cover up what's called their alarm pheromone, and that'll keep them nice and calm while I work the beehive. When I start knocking on the hive and start opening up the lid, that's gonna disturb them. So the bees at the top of the hive are gonna release a pheromone called the alarm pheromone, and that starts to get all the guard bees at the entrance of the hive out looking to sting. So this covers up that alarm pheromone. It's also a familiar smell, so if I'm working the hive every time and I'm using the same smoker fuel and I'm consistent in how I apply the smoke, then, and I'm also consistently gentle when I'm working in the hive, I feel like they really start to get used to me, and they know when I come and I have this familiar smell, then I'm not a threat. The other thing is, they do start to think there's a fire in the area, so as a precaution they start to fill their belly with nectar. So they actually can't get their body in the right position to sting me when they're filled up with nectar like that. See how I'm getting flames on the bottom now? That's what I want. The most essential tools to beekeeping are the smoker, for keeping the bees calm, and some sort of a hive tool. This is a simple one, it costs about $5 to $7, but it works great. And then, some sort of protection, but as you notice, I mean, I don't always have my veil on. And then I also have an upper entrance under this lid, so I'll just blow a little smoke under there. And usually I'll blow a little smoke all around the lid. And then because this is on the same pallet as this hive, I'm also going to smoke that hive, because they're going to feel the vibrations as well from this. I keep ratchet straps on them because these foam lids can blow right off, but also it's an extra bear protection. If the bear does get in here, I want that, he'll knock the hives over, but he won't actually be able to get into them. So I always lead with smoke. As I open the lid, I'm going to blow a little smoke under the lid, powder cover. This is one of the weaker hives. Actually, this is on the weak side. Usually when you open a lid, you're gonna see the inner cover is completely covered with bees. So it's most likely that we have a failing queen. So you can see everything's glued into place. This red substance that you can see all around. On the lid there, you see that red substance? That's propolis. So the bees collect tree resin and they use it as their glue. You can see some there too. They use it as their glue, and they also use it as their basically their natural antibiotic. So they'll, let's say if a mouse got in the hive, the bees would actually go and sting it to death and then mummify it in propolis. It'll keep it totally antiseptic. see a lot of activity in the top, a lot more down below. So just looking from the outside, I would think that this hive has got a failing queen. So we'll go looking for the queen and we'll go looking for the brood. You see how all the frames are pushed nice and tight together, and they're separated by this shoulder in between them. That creates what we call bee space. That's 3/8 of an inch. Dr. Lorenzo Langstroth, Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth from Philadelphia, discovered or observed that that was the amount of space that bees needed to work between the comb. So he designed the hive to have little spacers inside to have them keep all of their comb inside of a removable frame. And that became our first removable frame hive, or removable comb hive, which really kind of revolutionized beekeeping in the 1800s. So I'm gonna push all the frames over first so that I can open up that bee space and pull out the frame. I'm real careful to not, as much as possible, not squish bees. It happens sometimes, but you want to avoid it because then they release that alarm pheromone again. So, what do we see here? On the outside, see all this here, this capped wax? That's honey. This is their stored honey here. Inside of that you can see liquid nectar, more towards the middle. So that hasn't dehydrated enough. So they go and they collect nectar from the flowers, and they add an enzyme to it called invertase, and that starts converting the complex sugars into more simple sugars. And then they regurgitate it and pack it in the cells, and then they stand over it and they fan it with their wings to dehydrate it. So it'll go from up to 40, 50, 60% water content all the way down to 17% water content. Once it gets to that point, it's virtually imperishable. They found honey in King Tut's tomb that was still edible. So what the bees are doing is basically dehydrating it and then canning it for the winter time. That's why they cap it off with beeswax. They're preserving it for the winter time. Once it's entombed in the wax, once it's capped with the wax, there's no way that it'll ever go bad. Honey is hygroscopic, so it would absorb moisture, but if it's canned or it's capped in wax, it won't start to ferment ever. They make, here, I can show you on this bee where they make the wax. If you look on her underbelly, you can see 8 scales, 4 on either side, right on the bottom there. Those are the wax glands. So every one of those little scales excretes a little bit of wax. And then the bees pass it up to their mandibles, and they chew it up in their mandibles, and then they regurgitate, or then they build the perfectly hexagonal comb you see inside the hive. I get them started with a little bit of foundation, a sheet of foundation, just to keep everything nice and straight. So this is plastic Pureco foundation, and they build the wax out from that. So this is what it looks like when you start a frame, and then they're slowly building out the comb. A little too slowly with this hive. I have one lone larvae that's about to pupate. See that right there? Just below my finger. That's a pre-pupa. So that's 5 to 6 days old. And probably today it'll cap. Actually, it's more like 8 days because the queen lays an egg. It's an egg for 3 days. Then that egg hatches out, and then 5 to 6 days later, it'll pupate. And that's when the metamorphosis happens inside the pupa. I want to make sure I put everything back the same way I pull it out. See how I work nice and gentle. I keep an even pace. I try and not jostle things too much. That one hasn't been drawn out yet. Yeah, I can see this one's just starting to draw out. So let's see if we see our queen here. Doesn't look like it. See how this is all drone pupa. See how it's bulleted out. So all of these that you see here are workers. These are all females, infertile females. A drone, see if we see a drone, has big eyes and has a big rounded backside. Because his only purpose is to go out and inseminate other queens, basically to pass on the hive's genetics. So these are all drone pupa. They're bulleted out a little bit because the drones are bigger than the workers. This one here is special. See how that cell is pointing down instead of out? That's a queen cell. So that's a sign to everybody else if there's an egg in there or a larvae in there, which this one has an egg. Then that'll be a queen. So they start feeding royal jelly to that larvae when these eggs hatch out. So that royal jelly is a mandibular secretion that actually speeds up the development process of the queen. And the queen's fed royal jelly her entire lifetime. So the royal jelly is what makes her into a fertile female, as opposed to the worker bees, which are all infertile females. They don't have the capacity to lay fertilized eggs. So this tells me that either this is a queen that is failing, she's not, her fecundity's run out, so after mating, she holds all the sperm from the drones in her spermatheca gland, and it seems that that's running out. So she's failing. Or there is no queen, and one of these infertile worker bees has started laying infertile eggs. Well, I don't see any queen here. There's a drone. So you can see a drone versus a worker bee. See, he's got those big eyes. See how much bigger he is? He's got that rounded backside. His eyes almost look like a motorcycle helmet. That's to see the queen while flying on her nuptial flight. The drones basically go out every day and congregate in what's called a drone congregation area, DCA. So drones from different hives are mixing together basically in a cloud of bees, 30, 40 feet up in the air. And then a queen is drawn to that smell. A virgin queen is drawn to the smell of all those drones. And she'll fly through them and mate. The fastest and the strongest of the drones will mate with her mid-flight. And that's where she gets all of her fecundity, all the sperm. And she'll mate with multiple drones. She'll go back to the hive a couple times, and then go back to mate again. She'll mate with, I believe, up to 20 or 30 different drones. and then she's done. She'll never go on another nuptial flight again. She's done mating. She's got a longer abdomen, and also her thorax is a little bit, her middle section is a little shinier, doesn't have the fuzz that a worker bee does. And her legs are a little bit thicker. Okay, so that's a good example of what you don't want to see. Let's go find something that you do want to see. All this white flower you see that's up, the weeds, well, what you would call weeds, it's aster, and the bees love it. They're crazy for it. And then goldenrod's just about to bloom. A lot of the things that most of us would consider weeds make great honey. Purple loosestrife, Japanese knotweed, which is blooming right now. So notice the difference between that from that last one. When we opened the last one, the amount of activity in this hive versus that one. This is what we should see. It's pretty unlikely we're going to find the queen in the top here, but I can show you some amazing honey here. This is, I can already tell this is going to be a good honey producer. That's what we want to see. There she is. See if you can spot the queen. I'll come to you. The way I always recognize her is what we call the retinue. It's the cluster of bees that follows her around. Exactly. Right there.
Right there in the middle.
See the white dot on her back? I marked her.
Yeah.
You see how there's constantly bees surrounding her, and they're touching her with their antennae. And they're picking up what's called queen substance. That's her pheromone. That's her smell. And they basically pass that throughout the hive to tell everybody else everything's copacetic. You know, we have a queen, she's healthy. It's their way of communicating that everything's good. And they just pick her up very gently. Never, ever, ever touch the queen's abdomen, her backside. Her thorax you can touch. That's very strong. Her wings are very strong, and her legs are very strong. But her abdomen is where her ovaries are, and that's how you ruin a queen, is by touching the abdomen. So I pin her by her thorax, and I just pick her up by a wing, like that. And she doesn't, it's not her role to sting. She can sting, but I've never been stung by a queen. And then I'll just put her right back on, and watch to see that she goes back down in, so she doesn't get smashed. Because most of them are nurse bees that are raising brood, and I'll just pop it right into this other hive. And they won't fight, there won't be any problems at all just putting this one in. So every one of those eggs has the possibility to be a queen, and they'll just decide which ones they want to make into a queen. They'll draw them out. Basically, I collect a sample of bees, about 300 bees, to see how many mites they have out of 300 bees. Varroa mites are one of the most destructive things in beekeeping. What I'm going to do is I'm going to collect about 300 bees in a mason jar, and then I'm going to put some powdered sugar on top of those bees and shake them up so that they get coated in powdered sugar. That gets them to, it angers the bees, but it doesn't kill them, and it gets them to raise their body temperature So the mites, the parasitic mites that are on them, actually fall off. And then I can shake the mites through this screen on the powdered sugar, or with the powdered sugar, and the bees stay in the jar that way. It was a system developed by the University of Minnesota, and I love it. It's a great way to sample my bees for mites. The queen's not on this frame because we found her already and we put her elsewhere in the hive. We know that most of these bees are nurse bees. Nurse bees are the youngest bees, so they're between 1 and 2 weeks old. They're very young. They haven't actually developed their wing muscles yet, and they haven't developed their sting yet. They're too young to sting you. So I can be a little bit rough with these bees, which unfortunately I need to be to collect a good sample. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shake them into here. All the older bees will fly away and the nurse bees will stay behind. Also, the nurse bees are most likely to have varroa mites on them because they were the most recent to hatch out. So give a little shake. And I have my bees. That's my sample. I can let a few fly away here or there. Now I gotta measure half a cup of bees, which is this line here. So half a cup of bees is roughly about 300 bees. And like I said, these are nurse bees, so they're not gonna fly, and they really won't sting either. I can pour them right into my hand and they won't sting me. Because they're too young to sting. They don't have the sting yet. So now I can pour them in, and then I shake it up just to make sure I have the right amount, which that's too much. I don't want that many. So I'll shake a few out. Now I coat them in powdered sugar. This is how, and basically the powdered sugar is fine enough when it breaks up that the particles get underneath the mites' feet, so they can't grip onto the bees. And also, like I said, it gets when it coats the bees, it gets them, and I'm going to shake it up a little bit. That gets them to raise their body temperature, and the mites don't want to hold on anymore as well. So that gets them to let go. And we want to see that they're all good and coated. That's what it should look like. Maybe a little more powdered sugar. Get my finger a little wet. See that little red mite there? They're tiny, but you know, about the size of a pinhead. So that's what's killing the beekeeping industry, is these little parasites. I won't treat this one. If it were April and I had 4 mites, I would treat, because the mites build up over the year. Usually in the spring you have very few mites. In the fall you tend to have more. So 4 is not a bad number for this time of year.
And Ronnie backing out of it 2, 5, 7, and 7. Sponsored ride, heading down for Hell
The dark green spot on this map of Africa represents Ghana, population 27 million. About a third of the country is tropical rainforest. Another third is savanna. One more third is desert. Ghana is also on the ocean. Wildlife abounds. Gold. Ghana exports lots of it. They also export diamonds, cocoa beans from which chocolate is made, bauxite which is made into aluminum, manganese essential for stainless steel, oil, natural gas, and timber. Once part of the British Empire, Ghana is a thriving democracy, although it has known military rule. And the government has nationalized many major industries. Some residents are well off, but most live in poverty, earning about $2 a day. 70% of the population are farmers. And now, let's go back to Falls Village and meet the lovely Juliet Moore, who's visited Ghana on several occasions. Let's talk about Ghana.
Oh, okay.
I'm so intrigued.
Well, I have friends who in 1992, they lost all three of their children in a car accident. And their way of dealing with this was to travel the world and see where they could help children that had no parents. And they got involved in India and in Africa and decided pretty much on Ghana as a place to open their own home of refuge. And they've had 27 children there. And these children were
Orphans?
They were orphans. They were children that could not be taken care of by their families. They were children that were abandoned. They were children that were slaves. They were brought to them by family services. They came from different places. I mean, reading their stories breaks your heart. But they've been given a home. They are not available for adoption. The Joshua Christan home, named for the Moritz's three children, is their home. And 7 of them are now in college. One is getting his master's, one is now a nurse, and she's come back as a house mother. Another one is a nurse as well. One's becoming an architect, and he's designed a new school for the property. And I mean, it's just amazing, and they get into your heart. Last January, I went for the first time. And there isn't much I can do. I can paint and I can help with the kids and a few things, but you know, they certainly got into my heart, and the experience in Ghana was overwhelming. I wrote about it. That was in the Lakeville Journal, and it definitely changed my life. Here I had this unbelievable experience of Ghana, where they have nothing, and yet they're the most warm, loving, happy people. They just humble you so. And bracelets I've bought there, I wear every day because I just don't want to ever forget for a minute how crazy it is that just by chance I'm so fortunate. Another thing that totally changed my life is right before that I was diagnosed with cancer. And the doctor said to me, "We'll schedule your surgery." And I said, "Well, first I'm going to Ghana." And they went, "Don't you want to have the surgery right away?" And I went, "Oh, I'm going to Ghana. Then I'll come back and have the surgery." But then while I was going through the tests for that, they found out about a problem with my blood. So it was an interesting year. They thought I had leukemia, and they tested me for that for a couple of months, and then they decided I had a thing called polycythemia vera because I made too many red and white platelets. And so as I was planning my second trip to Ghana, they said, "Okay, you know, your blood it's dangerous. You know, you have to be careful, and we're going to put you on chemo pills." And I said, "Well, can we wait until after I get back from Ghana?" And she said, "You can't go to Ghana. You can't fly a 10-hour, 11-hour flight. That would be life-threatening for a blood clot." So again, I said, "Oh, I'm going to Ghana." And And I took a bunch of precautions as best I could, and I took my second trip, and that was last June. And a doctor said to me, "So have you thought about bucket list at all with what you've gone through?" So I said, no, I've had a phenomenal, very exciting, very interesting life. I have 2 unbelievable children, and I've been so lucky. I really don't have a bucket list. And then I went, oh, wait a minute. I want to take my kids to Ghana. So I did that in March. And my son is 32 and my daughter's 30. And who knew that I'd ever get a trip with them again? Because their lives, my daughter lives in Arizona, my son is in New York, and their lives are very full. And so it was amazing. It was amazing. And we spent time with the kids, and we did some things at the home, and then we did some traveling, and went to the slave castle in Ghana, which is a place everybody should see.
What did that do to you?
Oh, it makes you mentally and physically sick. What people have done to other people is horrific. And luckily they've kept this place where they had them imprisoned underground, waiting to go on the ships to come here. And the governor had his dining rooms and his parties and the church and everything above them. And they would hold them in these dungeons, and then when they transported them out to where they would take them out to the boats, it was done underground tunnels so that the guests and the people up above wouldn't see them. And then they were chained like cords of wood in a ship for the whole trip across the ocean. But yeah, it's an incredible experience. In Ghana, there are a lot of places where, in order to have water, they have to go to town with jugs to fill and carry them miles home, and they don't have electricity. And they work very hard to feed themselves day to day. So you don't come home and complain. You sure try not to, and you sure try not to waste.
Let's talk about your life.
Okay.
Where were you born, Juliet?
I was born in New York City.
Were you really?
Uh-huh. My parents came to New York from Colorado as actors back in the 30s. My mother had to get a job in banking. Her father had a bank out in Colorado. She had to get a job just so that they could eat in the 30s. You know, Depression.
Sure.
But my father was on Broadway. He did 9 Broadway plays.
Is that right?
Yes, he was very much the dashing leading man with long blonde wavy hair and mustache, and you know, they studied the Queen's English and a great deal of Shakespeare and fencing, and you know. Anyway, I was born in the city, and then we moved out we did a short stint in Dobbs Ferry, but then we moved to Bronxville. My father had to have a very dramatic home, and he found this house that was a 1911, I believe, reproduction of a chateau in Bronxville on top of this hill, complete with 7 towers. But when I was 13, I started modeling and was traveling after school into Manhattan and spending my summers every day there. And when I was 14, my father passed away. So my mom and I moved into Manhattan, and she wanted to live in a really nice neighborhood, so she got a 1-bedroom apartment. And here I was in high school and sharing a bedroom with my mom, which at the time I thought was just, the worst thing that could possibly happen. But it turned out that she only watched PBS, so I grew up with Masterpiece Theater instead of the sitcoms that my friends watched. And, Upstairs, Downstairs, and Brideshead Revisited, and I, Claudius, and all of these shows were the ones that I watched in high school. And I went to one school there for my junior year, but I had to switch to professional children's school because I had to be able to get out of classes for modeling because it was helping to pay the bills. And I always wanted to act. That was what I wanted to do. And I went to Emerson College as an acting major. And after a little while, discovered that I was too shy for auditions. I would just get physically sick when I had to audition. I just couldn't do it. And so I went to my advisor and I said, what should I do? And he said, change your major. So I changed my major to dramatic literature, and that's what I graduated with. So I wasn't too sure what to do with that when I got out of school. But I knew I always wanted to be involved with theater or television or something. So I went to work for NBC as first as a page. My girlfriend and I were the first female pages, and that was part of the guest relations department. And by the time I was 22, I was assistant head of the guest relations department at NBC. And then I wanted to be in production, so I got a job with a producer named Ron Greenberg, who was doing a game show called Who, What, or Where. And that was a lot of fun. We worked on production and writing the questions, and that was great. And then that show went off the air, and I worked on development of several other shows. And then I ended up going with Goodson Todman and working on What's My Line and then To Tell the Truth.
You don't look like you're old enough to have worked on those shows, because I'm 71 and I remember What's My Line and To Tell the Truth. Watched them all the time.
Well, I'm 2 years younger than you.
No kidding. My God.
Last Friday I just had my 69th birthday.
Well, happy birthday, Juliet.
Thank you.
I never would have guessed. So go ahead. You worked on the game shows.
Yes, and during that time I married a young man that I worked with at NBC. He was such a sweetheart. He had come to New York first to be in the Thanksgiving Day parade, Macy's parade, with a tuba under his arm, coming from Iowa. And he fell in love with New York, and he was an opera singer. And he moved back, and he got a job at NBC, and that's where we met. And we went out on our first date, and 2 weeks later he asked me to marry him, and 2 weeks later we were married. So maybe that's not the best thing to do, but in any case, he was wonderful, and we were married for 3 years, but we were not destined to stay together. So we split up, And then I met Terry, who worked in restaurants, and I worked in a bunch of restaurants, of course, through the years. And he and I decided, we met, and he was from England, and he was here temporarily, but we met and fell in love and decided we wanted to be together. And we decided we wanted to open our own restaurant. And we knew that if we did it in New York, we'd never get out of the city, and we loved the countryside. So we started looking up in the country, and we just fell in love with Northwest Connecticut and the Berkshires. And we spent every single weekend for 2 years until we found the building where we opened our restaurant in South Egremont, the old mill. And at that time, there was virtually no restaurants around. There was an inn around the corner, there was a luncheonette in Great Barrington, and maybe one other place, and then the Red Lion Inn up in Stockbridge. The last time I counted, which was probably 10 years ago, between the old mill and Red Lion Inn, there were 59 restaurants. So it was a completely different world back then. We opened in 1978, and we're still going.
You're still going?
Yes.
Oh, for goodness sake.
It's a fabulous restaurant. It's an old grist mill. And
What's the name of it?
The Old Mill. Terry was the chef, and I was out front and did the financial part and the training. And we really got busy from the beginning. And then a couple years after that, we bought the building across the street, which was the original mill house to the mill, and restored it, and I opened a better men's and women's sportswear store there. And that was doing very well, but then I got pregnant, and I had been trying for years, and that became a priority. And 3 full-time jobs really were a bit much, between the restaurant, the clothing store, and having a baby. So I closed the clothing store, and we eventually sold that building. And we stuck with the old mill, and then we had a second child. And one day, and we built a house in South Egremont. And one day Terry came home and he said, the White Hart Inn is going to be auctioned off. And we had been watching it become more and more derelict. It was closed down, and it broke our hearts. And I said, well, that's interesting. We've just built a house and we have no money. What are you thinking? And he said, oh, come on, we can do it.
The White Hart.
So I said, when is the auction? And he said, in 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks, I went crazy. By the time of the auction, had raised $1 million, and that was just going to be a beginning. And was the successful bidder at the public auction, and which was pretty dramatic because they had advertised it would be a public auction, so the town of Salisbury was there, and we bought it.
You and Terry?
Mm-hmm.
And you're owners to this day?
No.
No.
No, it didn't end there.
Oh, okay.
So we spent 7 months rebuilding it. We redid every inch of it. We did it very much as a country inn, formal country inn, and had a staff of 93.
Really?
Fabulous kitchen, 36 people in the kitchen.
Uh-huh.
Because we were restaurateurs, that was key to us. We had main dining room, a function room, banquet room, the tap room, and the garden room, which was supposed to just be for lunches, but we ended up having to serve dinner in there too. and 26 guest rooms. And it was hopping. It was really fun. Over the next few years, Terry and I split up. And so after a while, we stayed partners for a while, but then I sold the White Hart and I sold my share of the old mill to Terry. So, and he still has it. And then I thought, now what do I do? I was commuting to Avon for a year, doing business brokerage work. And we would go into businesses and help them if they were in trouble. And I started being a marketing consultant and representing the sale of businesses. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I couldn't keep going to Avon because here I was, a single parent, kids in school, having to pick them up, having to get them to sports, having to be there for them. And one day I get a phone call that my daughter has fallen and the ambulance is on the way, and I said I can't be an hour away anymore. So a friend of mine was a realtor, and she talked to her broker, and he offered me a job to redo their systems, create a website, redo their advertising, organize the office, and I got my real estate license, because to be a business broker, you don't have to have a real estate license, because you're not selling something that's attached to the ground, the definition of real estate. So I got my real estate license, and then I decided I wanted to go with the person that I considered to be the best realtor in the area, which was Elise Harney. And that was over 15 years ago. And I've gotten my broker's license since then, and I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
Meeting people and seeing them become happy when they find a home that they love.
It is. It's a very significant part of their lives. And I love houses. This house that I'm living in now is the 21st place I've lived. And it's very much like the restaurant business. I should say the restaurant business prepares you really well for it, because you really are dealing with unbelievable amount of details. And, you could easily have 8 or 10 properties under contract at the same time, and everyone has a gazillion details going on. You get to know, in the restaurant business, you get to know all these people, but you can never socialize with them because you're working every night. So people I have met in this business have become incredibly close friends.
Good.
Yeah. And the Harney family, I work out of their home, and we take our dogs to work, and it's very much a family. So I love it, and we're very, very busy. So we just, it's all good.